Doug's Plastic Adventures.
Hey everybody, welcome again to the Plastic Adventures. I am Doug and that is Steve. And we are going to be doing our sandbox today. We haven't done a sandbox in a long time. We've had a
Yeah,
couple of holidays. We've had a couple of adult things happen in the middle of all of that. But we finally decided to do a sandbox.
yeah, we just ran out of really deep thoughts to have about things. Uh, or we've gotten so old we just keep talking about the same things over and over and forgetting about it.
What do you want to talk about? I don't know. What did we talk
Could
about
be
last
that.
week? Let's talk about that
But
again.
yeah, you came up with a great idea for the topic this week. It was we were thinking about some Japanese based franchises that aren't Transformers. What did we think about them in the 80s when they were coming over as toys, and like how now? So we won't really like
Right.
kick around Power Rangers, but certain other franchises that have gone to sleep or that are kind of on the back burner that we've just sort of forgotten about. So um,
Yeah.
why don't you get us started off? Because there's several that came over that were just sort of, the toy lines were just so clogged up with the big five that,
Yeah.
what's one that you're thinking of?
Well, so what I was thinking when I came up with this topic was, there's more stuff that came out of Japan than just Transformers and things like that, right? They have a lot of different franchises that were really good. Not necessarily even toy related. I mean, they started out movie related, or maybe they started out anime and moved into the toy. But there's a lot of other great properties that I know that there's a lot of fans of, but that you and I specifically, we don't necessarily focus on or talk about a lot. So I was thinking, let's go ahead and do that this time. And so the first one that popped into my head was, and because it's been really popular the last couple of weeks, and it's been nominated for a special effects award, the story is really good. Godzilla, right? He's back in the limelight. He's bigger than ever. Uh,
Yeah.
and he was always kind of bigger, larger than life. But I wanted to think about how like how he was presented to me when I was younger, how I felt about him back then versus now. What do I think about that franchise now, and where have I seen it gone, and things like that. So that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Well, what do you think? I mean, when you first saw Godzilla, what was your first impression?
So when I first saw Godzilla, I did not see the 1950s version, black and white Godzilla. That was not the Godzilla that was introduced to me. Mine was like 70s, late 70s, early 80s Godzilla, where, he is got that weird, odd looking Godzilla face that he had. I don't know what it is. Before he jumped over to the 1985 Godzilla, where he got that weird dog cat mix looking face with the like roided out neck that he had. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but so that was kind of in between the Godzilla that I was introduced to. The really campy Godzilla, where he's fighting the other kaiju, and like, flying across the battlefield.
With the drop kick. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's what I fell in love with, honestly. So as a little kid, I didn't know any different that was campy or not. That was just Godzilla, and I loved every little bit of it. Um, the side stories about it too, where you have the the weird two little girls singing for Mothra, and like all of the little weird elements that kind of went into Godzilla. Uh, that's that was what it meant to me. So going into the later years, the later 80s, where Godzilla started going away from that campiness and started going into the more hardcore, and then just kind of fluctuating from there on out until modern times, where we get the well, nobody talks about 1998 Matthew Broderick Godzilla. We're just not even going to bring that up.
Nope,
But
done.
but the Godzilla that came out after that, right? The new one, right? The King of the Monsters, huge, very Americanized Godzilla, right? I feel like that Godzilla is more geared towards the American audience than it was towards the Japanese audience. Um, and going into, Godzilla versus Kong that's coming up now in that same line, in that same franchise. But now we have Godzilla minus one, which is kind of like a throwback to the bygone era of when these were horror movies,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? These were
Um,
scary monsters doing things that were deadly, that were causing destruction, that they were something to be
consequences.
scared of.
Yeah, there were consequences to what happened, and it wasn't supposed to be this funny kaiju battle back
Right.
back then, but it's weird how it's like it went serious into camp, and then it's back to serious, and then it went back to camp
Yep.
again when you start looking like the Japanese movies. Once you got into like the 90s and outside of it, they had a great series of like pretty darn good Godzilla movies.
Yep.
Uh, the one where all out monster assault or whatever that one was called, where all the monsters fight, but it wasn't quite as like cheesy as
Right.
some of like the 70s stuff. But now, dude, Kong versus Godzilla are stupid movies. Like, I'm sorry, anybody out there who's insulted by that, they're dumber than Pacific Rim. And
They
that says a lot. Like, those are stupid movies. They're
yeah.
not entertaining or engaging to
Well,
watch.
compare the two that are out right now, the Kong versus Godzilla franchise, or the combination of those two, versus Godzilla minus one, which is, yeah, I think they're both Toho, right? But I think the minus one is now more of a back to the drawing board type of
Yeah.
Godzilla, where they are directly connecting it to the Godzilla 1958. And so, and it's bringing it back, like I said, to its horror roots. It's making Godzilla scary again. It's making something to be feared. It's the whole reason why he was made, because they wanted to draw this correlation between him and the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima and all of the devastation that was caused in Japan when that bomb dropped. So
Mhm.
Godzilla is really an allegory for what Japan went through, all of that. Um, and so you see all of that, and you're, as a little kid, you're looking at the Godzilla that you're introduced to, and you no longer see that, right? You didn't even know that was a thing. Uh,
Yeah. So minus one went to history shows again and again how nature points out the folly of man. Godzilla. Yeah,
yeah, totally.
yeah, got it.
So, but as a kid, I'm thinking about how I saw it versus how I see it now, right? And I know that Godzilla has always been very popular. He may not be ones that like are super popular with you and I, but he's always been very popular. I don't think he's ever really gone away. But I think between when I was introduced to him and then seeing the older movies, the 1958 movies, all of that, and then seeing what he's become now with Godzilla minus one, um, I would say that Godzilla is a very strong franchise.
Yeah, it's pretty evergreen.
It
It
would
kind of
have to be.
evolves and finds an audience again and again. I was not as connected to that as a kid. Like I remember seeing them like on TBS or something. You'd see a Godzilla on a Saturday afternoon or something like that. USA Network like to play a lot of those movies, sometimes late at night.
Hmm.
Um, I'm glad to see it go back to a more serious tone like it was supposed to be.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
also a support series out with Kurt Russell right now. I haven't seen it, but uh, I think they're trying to move toward that. But then you got the silliness like Godzilla versus Kong, which are just the most like awful
Yeah,
junk movies. They're not as bad as the 98 Godzilla or whatever that was with Broderick, but they're really bad. Now here's my thought since we talk about toys a lot. How the hell do you get kids to play with Godzilla? Because sometimes he's a protagonist, sometimes he's an antagonist.
yep.
I almost think you have to come up with like a strong core of human characters, and you got to figure out for a way for them to like interact with Godzilla, like Godzilla's a character, but you got to buy the humans to go with it, and then you have to have threats. But how do you do that without turning it into Power Rangers or like
Exactly.
making some funny cartoon or something that like the that god awful cartoon from the 80s with Godzuki and uh
Well, no, but you make a good point. I mean, the characters, especially in the new movie, are very well done. But are they well done enough that a child would be like, "Hey, I got this guy as an action figure. He was really cool in the movie, but he doesn't do anything else, right?" So,
yeah. And I mean
I
we got Kong versus Godzilla figures on the shelf,
mm,
like the monsters themselves, but it's going to
I
be
was
a
not
real
really drawn to
lightweight
those.
offering, and it's going to be a one-off because the new movie is going to be here and gone and forgotten about. um I think that's a really hard franchise to turn into something that could become like a sustaining toy that
Mhm.
isn't all collector based, like Super 7 vinyls or any of that stuff. That's a tough one because Kong figures, they always plug the shelves up.
They do. Yep.
Um, Boy, that's tough, but it's evergreen. It's not going to go away.
No, no. But I do know that my feelings towards Godzilla have changed as I've gotten older. So I absolutely love the campiness of the old ones, but I'm with you. I'm glad that Godzilla is taking a more serious tone and it's going back to its roots. I feel like that's where it shouldn't have never really left that.
Yeah, and the one thing I'm going to bring up before we switch over to a different one is I've recently rewatched Predator
Mm-hmm.
and Aliens, the Terminator, and those are all survival horror movies,
Hmm.
right? That's the sweet spot I think for Godzilla.
Ah, yes.
Environmentally, where like in Cloverfield, where you had the people trying to survive the Cloverfield monster,
Hmm.
I think that's where Godzilla needs to be. I don't think that we need to give him space powers and all of that stuff.
Right. Well,
Uh,
so it's more like Godzilla is like a this huge ecological disaster, and it's the people that are trying to fix it or trying to survive it.
they're trying to survive it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to present it, and I would prefer to watch it that way rather than
Yeah, I don't know if you saw
maybe.
-1, but the story is very well done. The characters, even though it was all done in Japanese, like you forgot you were watching a Japanese movie. Like the characters were very well done.
I'm gonna see it pretty soon.
It's
It's
good.
on
I
the
highly
list.
recommend it. Definitely go see it.
Yeah, I'm gonna catch it. I saw Wonka and absolutely am in love with that movie. It was
Oh, are you?
terrific, even
I
for a
haven't seen it
musical.
yet.
Yeah, yeah, but we're not talking about Willy Wonka.
No,
But
no.
if you guys go see it, it's terrific, and it just has all these beats from the original. But anyways, moving on.
Yeah. So let's talk
Um,
about another one. Let's talk about another Japanese import that I don't think we talk enough about, only because I know you know a lot about it, but I don't know a lot about it. But I absolutely still love it. I recognize it and I know what it is. So let's talk about well, I mean, they're all separate, but they're all kind of the same because they've all kind of drive inspiration from each other. So let's talk um Gundam, let's talk Macross, and let's talk Robotech, because they all kind of
okay.
seem very similar, but they're not. They're very different.
So plot wise, yes, different, and for Gundam, like way different. It hops
Right.
around, but it's essentially centered around two conflicting factions. One usually has been mistreated by the other, and there's an uprising and a revolt. So Gundam kind of weaves in and out. It really, for those series, I think I might have caught some original Gundam episodes when I was a kid. And we're talking like RX-78, the original
Hmm.
like Gundam that everybody knows. Uh, but it's gone through some really strange like mainstream iterations. Like
Hmm.
never in the 80s did it hit here and stay strong. Could it have? Probably if they had some good figures to support it, but would it have been crowded out by Transformers at the time because they were so like Gundam is late 70s and Transformers early 80s.
Yep.
So I think Gundam kind of sat in this realm with uh God Mars and some of the other giant robot anime that Diamos that could have probably had something like Voltron, because
Mhm.
they were all this like giant mecha anime stuff.
Yep.
Voltron lucked out. It was different enough that it got supporting toy lines and some really terrific toys for back in the day. But so Gundam, what does that need? Gundam needs a series that's accessible.
Mhm.
And you in the early 2000s, we had Gundam Wing,
Yep.
and that just brought the slew of model kits and
Yep.
uh strangely enough, the toys, they did this thing where they took some of the model kits and they just made them into like these injection molded rubber things, and they sold model kits as action figures, but they were
Right.
never like, I mean, they were like this hard heavy rubber that they were made of. And the model kits were too fragile for little kids to play with. I had bunches of them. But it's so dependent on getting a series that engages people. And you had Gundam Wing that did such a good job. And then you had something like G Gundam, which was Street Fighter Gundam.
No.
And that was really kind of weird. Like, no G Gundam figures showed up on the shelves. So the core is there. The idea that you've got these factions at war and they do battle in these giant war machines, these mecha suits. And
Mhm.
I think that, a tank or a hovercraft or a jet makes more sense, but robots are cool.
Well, so I
So
have to tell you, so I had very little exposure to things like Gundam and Robotech when I was younger. In fact, I remember playing with Transformers, and one of the neighbor kids was like wanting to play with us, and he brought over his, and I'm like looking at this thing like, that's not a Transformer. What the hell did you bring this for? Why
oh
you?
yeah. Yeah, it was probably something out of the Griggs or some place where they imported some of these,
Yeah,
like they imported these die-cast robot toys with like nary even an ounce of English on the package.
I
They
know.
were cool
I
though,
mean,
and the
that
styrofoam
doesn't that
smelled good.
it doesn't take away how cool it was. It just
Yeah.
means that like I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the backstory, what it was. I didn't know the characters. I didn't know anything, right? I mean, do you really need to know all of that to play with a toy? No, you don't. You can fill it all in how you want. You can come up with your own stuff, but it certainly does help in recognizing what it is and going
The
out
lore
and
is very important. It has to have something engaging about the characters, I think, to capture a kid's mind to want
Mhm.
to play with it.
But it also
Um,
has to have that marketing value. Like I don't remember any commercials for Gundam. I
it just
barely remember maybe a commercial for Robotech or a cartoon, but that was probably about it. Like I do not like I do remember Voltron commercials.
yeah.
So
Yeah, Robotech had really weird commercials. They had like this Robotech to the rescue, and the animation was really bad. Um, so
yeah,
Gundam, I think that Gundam was different enough because you have enough mecha designs. You could have rolled a toy line out for that and maybe made something out of it. It is sort of relegated into this collector's realm now, which is a shame because it's probably something that story, even now, like uh, where we're more into equity
mhm,
and the humane treatment of human beings. That story of people being second class citizens and rising up because they're being oppressed. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, like contextually for now.
sure.
You can have a heavy tone, but you could present it in a way that is not so heavy that it's for adults. Exo Squad was a
Yeah,
great
that
like
came out in the '90s,
version,
didn't it?
right? Yeah. So Exo Squad did with that series kind of what Gundam could have done or could have been, but it was just so heavily dependent on the anime to drive the toys that it just didn't strike home. And I could see where you're talking like Diamos, where you buy the vehicle and you buy the figure to go in it, and
Mhm,
then what do you get? Like some kaiju for it to fight.
right.
Uh, so like you got that problem there. But Robotech, there isn't really a reason in the universe right now why that story hasn't been retold like 3 times and had like monster success in toy aisles, other than a little company of a company of short-sighted individuals called Harmony Gold, which is like one desk and two people, who hung up the rights for Robotech on a music license or some bull crap like that. They think they have Transformers, and you don't have Transformers till you got Transformers.
Exactly.
That's a super compelling story, and I would even say that uh, the fact that the Zentradi end up kind of turning around and becoming allies to the humans, and they go against their original masters. What a terrific progression of story. You've got great vehicles that you need pilots to go in.
Mhm.
So whether you had a 6-inch transforming toy that came with a little 1 inch and a half tall Rick or Roy or something that could sit in there, I mean you have a great opportunity for small scale figures like what they've done recently with Avatar. Have
Mhm.
you seen those figures in the
Yeah.
stores?
Yep.
Briefly.
I saw them.
You've got like a little inch tall pilot that goes in there, inch and a half, that can kind of move a little. You got tons of great mecha designs. You got a compelling story. Um, that really hit home with kids because it had a lot more grown up themes.
Yeah.
It
Well,
surprised me when I
so
was a
what
kid.
I think it needs is I think it needs a refresh, right? It
Yeah,
definitely needs a refresh. So do you remember seeing the new Voltron? Um
I
and
did. I really liked it. The new one that was on
There was
Netflix.
the one that was on Netflix, and then there was
Yeah.
Castlevania that was on Netflix. So you know
Oh, love that.
the animation company. I forget I think they're Powerhouse Animation. I think that's what they're called. Um, I think having Robotech redone with those animators telling a story, a mini series of maybe like 8 episodes, and really kind of just taking the story back to the basics. I think that would get a lot of people on board and talking about Robotech again.
I think so too. I think we want it.
Hmm.
I think that generally, like anybody who's heard of it wants to see it come back. And I also think that it is something that would engage kids especially if it talked to, um, if it played up the part where you have societal outcasts or people who are seen as less than.
Yeah,
Um, I really think that there's a lot of kids that feel that way now,
yeah,
whether they've been, the pandemic held them from seeing their friends or giving them social exposure, or uh I mean, you've got like all of these expectations because of social media that these children have to live up to now that we
very
never had to
true.
see.
Yeah,
uh I mean, you can get a lot of that wrapped up into Robotech. I mean, hell, you could even fast forward and have Zentradi and humans that are together, and the Zentradi kids are struggling to fit in. Not kids, but like recruits coming into the Air Force or
right,
something like
right.
that. And you could really tell a really great story. Macross just suffered from, like, it couldn't come here because of how oppressive and restrictive Harmony Gold was and is.
That's
If
too bad.
oh, yeah, how about that? So you got them stopping it, and unfortunately, it became just like a purely Japanese for the Japanese consumer. It's gone down these paths that I don't know. Like, you can't take Macross Delta. You couldn't take Macross Plus or Macross 2 and present that to like in the form of toys to be mass marketed here,
Right.
because it's too shoehorned into what it is. We need a series that is broad and opened up, and is opened up like the original Macross to pull people in. But I mean, God help us, man. I don't know if we'll ever see it, but how
No,
terrific would that be?
but I do know that there were toys for Macross, right? Just like there were toys for Robotech. And I think that if the marketing was done right, and if there was a solid show to go along with it, I think you could have a generational thing, kind of like what we have with Transformers and GI Joe and Masters of the Universe, right? We have people our age who watch those things when they were younger and wanting to share that with their children, but there's no new thing to share with them, right? It's just sharing the same old thing with them. Whereas nowadays there's new Transformers, there's new Masters, there's new GI Joe. The brand has been refreshed for those, and it would be
Yeah,
really nice to be able to do that, for have all of those other fans of all of these things be able to share that with their kids, but to be able to share something new, right? Their kids can be like, oh, this is a new thing. It's not old. Dad isn't showing me old things. This is brand new. In fact, it's so brand new that there's a new show and there's new toys and there's new phone apps and there's new whatever. So
And to be honest, the original Robotech toys by Matchbox, they're not that good.
no,
There's a few that are okay, but I mean, they couldn't have a transforming jet, which was like the centerpiece of their entire deal.
right.
Because Hasbro needed a new transformer. It wasn't on purpose or out of malice. But and they imported as much as they could for all the other scaled Macross stuff and brought it in that they could
Yeah.
sell to a kid that wasn't hyper expensive, or it wasn't. I mean, they even brought the model kits, and
Well,
kids can't really play with those model kits.
I was going to say, so I know that Gundam is very heavy into the model kit industry, right? I know whenever I go to things like Hobbytown or anything like that, like Gundam is all over the place. So I know that there's a market for them because I know people are buying them and I know people love them, but but me as a consumer, as just this nerd who is looking for something new, there's nothing about it that is making me want to go out and watch this stuff or making me want to go out and buy this stuff. I mean, other than it just being giant robots, which is itself kind of cool, but there's nothing else to go along with it right now.
Yeah, there just hasn't been a series that's been able to reach out and engage. And I talked about how weird G Gundam was. I actually really liked it.
Yeah.
But it's a specific taste, it's a specific thing. All the themed Gundams that were like weird Street Fighter type of a thing that they did with it.
Yeah, but I mean, can you imagine just if they announced tomorrow, like, hey, Powerhouse Animations is redoing Robotech, so, an 8-episode miniseries to retell or bring forward a new telling of the story of Robotech. Like how jazzed would people be for that? I think they would be beyond jazzed.
I think so. I do. And if it was a joint venture, and it was kind of made somewhat with the American consumer in mind, and it wasn't just a purely like Japanese show where it might not hit the right beats that we're used to seeing in our media. I think it would have legs. I just think the only thing holding it up is a couple of little troglodytes sitting in a desk somewhere. But anyways,
but I do have enough good memories from when I was younger to want to be able to see these franchises today succeed and become something bigger, right? I mean, well, not bigger. They're already kind of big where they're at, but I mean, like really exposed specifically to the American audiences, right? So, especially now, I mean, like anime is very big. Anime is a big thing in America. It's growing year by year. There's all kinds of stuff that goes with it. So I hate to see these other ones kind of just left behind when all these other newer anime are coming out. Like, I get people are watching, Jujutsu Kaisen and they're watching One Punch Man and they're watching all these other things, but those are all built upon the predecessors that we came up with, like Robotech, like Macross, like those ones. So I would love to be able to see those come forward and be super popular again.
Yeah, I think that Robotech would have the legs. We kind of talked about this in another episode, but why isn't Machine Robo / GoBots cool? Like, why is that not a thing?
I don't know. I just recently rewatched. I did, well, not rewatched, watched for the first time. I didn't know there was a Machine Robo cartoon.
Did you watch The Revenge of Kronos?
Yeah.
I love the opening song for that. It's really, really cool.
But you look at that and you look at what we got, and they're like two very different things, even though they were the same toy. Two very different stories.
Yeah, and like one of them went really, really kid, and then the other one kept it serious enough to look kind of. So, unfortunately, GoBots really lost that one, but they were successful, right? Like they sold a crap ton and they made money, and it had its cartoon in syndication. How do you reintroduce that? It's really tough with already having a Transformer in the market, and Hasbro owns GoBots. But do you think
what I think you do is you market it as a link to Transformers? You market it, you definitely acknowledge that now they are part of the same thing, but
like Transformers Multiverse.
or something. Yeah.
But do you do a series like Machine Robo where you had Vai Kung Fu, that guy that could like merge into the robot body
That's
kind of a
freaking
thing?
cool, by the way.
Very cool. I wish could have one of those figures, but they're prohibitively
They
expensive.
are very expensive.
Uh, I mean, do you do it like Transformers Multiverse? Do you do all the GoBots in Scout class?
Oh, yeah, I would think
Yeah.
because
Do you
when they were a toy, they all the GoBots were the same relative size. They didn't have different sizes. Well, they
Yeah, I
did.
mean,
They
do you
had
try to
super
keep this
GoBots
around
and
like $10 for the figures, and then if you have a lead character, does he have like a power armor that you buy and combine him with? And do you still do the thing with the monsters?
um
Or like the where the monsters were the bad guys and there's, a dozen different monsters. Do you create a new threat who's some sort of monstrous creature? And do you do it that way rather than go like Renegades versus
Guardians.
Guardians?
Yeah. Or maybe somebody's really creative out there and can find a way to do a mixture of the two. I don't know. But I definitely think that GoBots has a very large and varied cast of characters that would be I think a popular thing today. People love collecting, they love collecting all of them. So GoBots would scratch that itch. And then you would have the Transformers connection. So I think GoBots is beyond ripe for a comeback. I absolutely do.
Could you do GoBots in like the Machine Robo style boxes where they were in a box where you
Yeah.
couldn't see the figure? Put them at like 9.99, but then do chase variations, right?
Oh yeah.
Like the Blue Leader one or the Black Cycle or the White Crasher. You think
Yeah.
that would stick?
Yeah, I would. Well, it would stick for me. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, like if
I would
it if
jump
it
all over
if it
that.
had a cartoon that was engaging, you don't copy Transformers with Autobots versus Decepticons, but this is Transformers multiverse GoBots. I think that might have something. Like it's still marked for the figure you're gonna get. So if it's
Hmm.
Rescue or Turbo,
But you don't know
but
if it's
then
going to be the ups. If it's going to be the very one.
yeah,
You don't
you
know if
could
it's going
get
to be the
the
variant.
variation, the color variant version. That might be a really cool way to engage people at like a $10 price point. You could do some small play sets if you wanted to, but that might that might have legs. I mean, that might be a way to
It would
get
be
that
really
kind of
cool. I would love to see something like that. Like I know that there is still life left in these old franchises that we have not seen, and all it takes is one of these companies willing to take that risk and do something outside of the box, and give us something new with these old franchises. I think it could definitely run.
yeah. And we talked about in the toy mill, got off subject about like it'd be cool to see GoBots as part of the um sort of like multiverse line that Transformers is doing
Sure.
now. You make them in that $20 scale or whatever, that $24 scale, getting just a few core class characters. But I would almost love to see a line of smaller figures with today's like modern sculpting and then blind packages and all that cool
Oh
stuff. That
man,
would
that
be
would be
cool.
so much fun. Can you imagine? I mean, like people already are chasing the variants of from other toy franchises anyway. This would just add right to it, I think.
Yeah,
That's a
I'm
great
definitely
idea.
down for that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So if Hasbro or Mattel are watching, which I know that they are, right. We are available for consult. We'll even do it for free. All right. So
Just send us toys when
yeah,
they're
yeah.
done.
Send
Yeah.
us toys. We work for toys. We'll work for toys. I'll stand on the corner of the road with a sign that says that. I don't know if I'll get any toys, but
You have no idea what I'll do for toys. But yeah, you do. You know
yeah,
that.
yeah, I do. If
Anyways,
anybody
yeah.
does, I do. All right. We're at the end of the time for our show. So it's been a long time since we have done a sandbox. I'm glad we did it. It was fun to talk about even just an off the wall topic like this. So look forward for us to continue to doing this in the new year. Thanks for joining us. Join Steve on Facebook because he's a dinosaur at Plastic Adventures Toy Community, and me on Instagram because I'm just so hip at the Toyman 80s. And we will see you in the toy aisle.